So what we're talking about today is lessons learned. We're talking about the newsroom culture that you're going to be moving into, because it's going to be one that you probably have not encountered because you probably haven't been in that particular newsroom. And you're going to have the pressures and stress of learning lots of stuff and being the new kid on the block and all that good stuff. The good news is we have a panel of people here who have been through this already. They've been through this program or supervised people who've been in this program. And guess what? They live to tell about it. And they're going to tell you about it today. And then we're going to open it up for questions, because this is going to be your chance to ask these folks who have been in your shoes anything that you want to ask. So our panelists today are Krys'tal Griffin from the started say from the Washington Post. Maybe that's sorry, Mike. Maybe that's next 10 years panel from now, with the Wilmington News Journal. When we also have Hope Kahn, who was with the interned with the Annapolis Capital, Clara Niel, who interned with the Frederick News Post, and we have Mike Feeley, the executive editor of the News Journal in Wilmington. Thanks to all of you for being here. So let's start off. Each panelist is going to talk for no more than 10 minutes, giving you a snapshot of the most important things that they learned. This can be informal learning, formal learning, whatever, and then we'll open it up for questions. So let's lead off with Krys'tal.
All right, thank you for the introduction. Hi, everyone. I interned last year through this program with the News Journal in Wilmington, Delaware, and that's also where I work now. So my biggest piece of advice, I would say, is to try new things, which definitely sounds a bit cliche, but I think it's one of the best things you can do. I know a lot of you might have assignments where you're either on sports, or maybe you're shadowing an education reporter, or maybe you're doing more breaking news. But I think an internship is a great opportunity to learn, and that's the whole entire point of it. So you should think about what beat you're interested in and what skills you want to strengthen, and ask about getting involved. During my internship last year, I was primarily working on the breaking news and trending news team. So that was a lot of cops briefs and covering crime and that sort of thing. But I knew I wanted to learn a lot more about writing longer stories, maybe dabbling in food writing. So in the beginning of my internship, I spoke up and said, these are things I want to try. And of course, I have a great team at the News Journal, so they were able to let me jump right in, pitch ideas, go and follow the things I wanted. And I think that was a really valuable experience, because the more you try, the more you know what you like and don't like, what skills you need to strengthen. And I think being a journalist is more than just having your beat and thinking that you're an expert at it. It's about being well-rounded and trying new things, because as the times change, we should be able to change with them, and being able to jump in when another reporter might be stuck or need help, or if someone's off, and say, you know what, if the food reporter's out this week, like, I can take on some of their stories. Or if we have, a watchdog reporter who's out, or maybe needs some help with something, you can speak up and say that you want to help them with that. And that also goes into my next piece of advice, which is to get to know the people in your newsroom. For me, my first 2 internships were completely virtual due to the pandemic. But even, speaking to everyone through these tiny boxes on Zoom and Microsoft Teams, I was making an effort to reach out to everyone, get to know them. And last year, my internship was thankfully in person. So I was in the newsroom every day, actually sitting there with reporters, shouting across the newsroom, talking to each other. And it was a really great experience just to see how other people took their stories from an idea or just a tip they got via email or a phone call, and turning it into like a real tangible story. I also always carved out time during my work week to read stories from other reporters, which I think is also a really great thing to do. You can see how they're approaching certain topics, how they take certain information maybe they talked about with you in a meeting, or you heard them talking about with someone else, and how they incorporated that into their stories. Because now that some of us might have graduated and aren't in school anymore, or maybe some of you guys aren't in summer classes, I think that's a great way to continue learning and still, sharpening up your skills and kind of figuring out how you can improve. I know my newsroom, we have a few different groups that some reporters have started. So 2 of them I'm in. One of them is a watchdog reporting group where we just talk about what investigative stories we're working on. And it's really helpful for bouncing ideas off of each other. There's another one which we call Writing Club, where we just read various stories from other publications, whether it's like the New York Times or the Washington Post, and we talk about what we liked, maybe how we can do a story like that here in Delaware, ways we thought it could improve, maybe certain stories we've done that kind of relate to that. And I think, again, it's a great way to continue learning and collaborating with other people. If you have an entire newsroom at your disposal, I think you should take advantage of their expertise and their knowledge and how everyone can kind of help each other and help you be the best that you can be, because that's the whole entire point of an internship. So I hope you guys enjoy your summers and you have a really great time at all of your respective publications.
Thank you, Krys'tal. Loaded with good advice. And you were talking about making sure that you read your own publication, which is certainly something that you want to do to give you cred with your colleagues. And also, she made the point about if you see something that another reporter has written that you think is really good or was a unique idea or something like that, A, you want to read it and mark it, but B, you want to go talk to that reporter and say, hey, I was really interested. Where did you ever come up with that? Or how are you able to get that person to say this thing? Or where did you find those records or whatever? So it's always flattering to have people ask you about your work, and so don't be shy about doing that. All right, let's go to Hope. Give us
Hi,
hope.
everyone. I am Hope. I go to UMD. I'm graduating December, and last summer I interned with the Capital Gazette. And I started my internship last summer at a turbulent time. But I think the word turbulent is an understatement for the Capital Gazette because they're always going through something. So last May, as some of you might know, Alden ended up purchasing the Capital Gazette along with the Baltimore Sun. And the week following the purchase, Tribune Publishing offered voluntary buyouts for the staff of the Capital Gazette, as well as the Baltimore Sun and a few other Tribune-owned newspapers across the country. And I knew that the buyouts were a thing, but I wasn't really thinking it was going to affect me directly, but I was wrong. And a week and a half into my internship, Rick Hutzel, the editor-in-chief of the Capital Gazette, who had been there since 1987, called to tell me that he was taking the buyout. And then a few days later, Chase Cook, an assistant editor, called to tell me that he was also taking the buyout. And it was kind of just an abrupt awakening to, like, the journalism industry that people do call vicious. But I was placed at a paper who put out a newspaper the day 5 of their coworkers were shot and killed in the newsroom. And at a newsroom meeting that week, some of the Capital Gazette staff asked Jay Judge, the director of content for community newspapers, with the Baltimore Sun and the Capital Gazette and other papers, like how was the paper going to survive with just one editor's left? And he said the paper isn't going anywhere. And so basically for my time at the Capital Gazette, I covered basically every single beat. I kind of was just thrown in as a reporter because it was a very small staff, and it was diminishing as the summer went on. So they really did treat me as one of their journalists, which I'm so thankful for because it gave me a great opportunity to really try new things and step outside of my comfort zone. But I also was able to establish connections with people. And I really learned that a newspaper isn't the walls that make up the newsroom, but it's the journalists and it's the community and the words that are written. And that's my biggest takeaway is we didn't have a physical newsroom. Our meetings were virtual, but I was able to go out and cover things in Annapolis that were in person, and that was an awesome experience. But my biggest piece of advice, kind of going off of what Krys'tal said, but for me, it's always to say yes. If you're asked to cover an event, a crime, a trial, a death, anything at all, say yes, even if you're scared to do it. I was asked last summer by one of the reporters at the Baltimore Sun to go and find Larry Hogan at the 4th of July parade that was happening in Annapolis, since I was already going to be there. And the decision for a trial for the extended unemployment was going to be announced, and they were like, you're going to be there, try to find him. And his press secretary was ghosting her. So basically there was no plans made at all. She was like, he might be at the start line of the parade. He might not be, just if you can find him, great. If you can't, it's okay. But I said yes, even though I was absolutely terrified. But I ended up, finding him, and I asked him questions. And then the next day, my byline appeared on the front page of the Baltimore Sun, along with a few other reporters. So basically, always say yes, no matter what. It's a great experience just being a journalist with any of the MDDC Press newspapers that they have placed you with, and just have fun. I mean, it's really fun to be a journalist. So yeah.
Okay, Hope, thank you very much. You talking about turbulent times. You went through, we couldn't have imagined more turbulent times than what you went through, but you kept your cool. The paper sort of coalesced around you. I remember being in touch, and one of the other editors stepped up pretty quickly, and it seemed to me that they also communicated with you and demystified the process as much as they could, because they didn't know how the ultimate outcome either. But the fact that you came through it well is a real tribute to you and to the rest of the staff there at the CAP. And we're glad to have Rick as one of our coaches this year too. We take advantage of his expertise. All right, Clara, you're on.
Hi, everyone. I'm Clara. Like Hope, I am graduating from UMD this summer. And last summer, I interned for the Frederick News Post, where I am also currently working. I guess I'll just sum up sort of what Krys'tal and Hope really said, which is sort of like squeeze everything that you possibly can out of this internship, whether that means, being a yes man and taking on any assignment, or sort of like, taking your coworkers out to lunch or to coffee and sort of talking about, their journey to journalism and, stuff that they did. I was very, very lucky in my internship experience. I think I had sort of like the quintessential experience. I got to go into the newsroom. It was my very first experience in a newsroom where I got to like sit at a desk and I had my own phone, and there was a lot of like collaboration, but also there's this weird sort of like Diamondback to Frederick News Post pipeline going on the past couple of years. So I knew most of my coworkers, and that was really helpful in my experience. And the whole newsroom was just great because they were very open to helping me. I kind of went in worried that, I would just be like some sort of lowly intern and I'd have to do these like lowly sort of tasks, but they treated me, sort of as like an equal. And they gave me assignments. And, after the first week, I started to gain some confidence, and I started going into the office and being like, hey, every morning, what do you have for me today? Give me something to do. And otherwise, maybe I'd go for a ride along with the cops reporter. Maybe I'd go to the courts. Maybe I'd just shadow someone else, like maybe shadow a photographer. Really just kind of go out of your way to do everything. That way you can sort of get a feel for it. Also, don't be afraid to ask your editors for like feedback on your writing. That was one thing that I knew I wanted to get out of this internship, is that I wanted to sort of get more feedback on my writing and see how I could be better. So they took the time to like sit down with me and like go through stories like line by line, and we would work on it, and that really helped. But yeah, I mean, they pretty much said everything. Just do everything that you possibly can. Don't be afraid. Know your worth. People, when you call people, and don't be like, oh, I'm just an intern trying to write a story. Like, no, you are here in the newsroom. You are a reporter. You are calling to get, the story. So, act as such. You guys are all super accomplished, being here. And I hope you guys have a great time with your internships as much as I did. So, yeah.
Great, Clara. Thank you very much. And you had a colony of terrapins there in the at Frederick. Still is one, as I understand. It's even grown a little bit, I think.
Yeah, we are pretty much taking over the news desk, and now we have one sports reporter, and the news editor is a professor at UMD. So there's just this whole clan now.
There you go. Well, and that was a great tip about going in with goals of your own. know what you most want to get out of this internship. You're going to get a ton of stuff, a ton of opportunities, but is it writing you want to work on? Is it a certain long form journalism? Is it writing on deadline? I mean, what are some specifics that you really want to work on? And share that with the people that you're working for and with, and let them know. All right, let's go. Speaking of people you're working for and with, let's go to Mike Feeley, who is the executive editor at the News Journal in Wilmington. Mike, from your side, your paper has a strong history of having interns, and they turn out pretty darn well. So, what are your observations, and what advice might you pass along?
Well, first thing is, I love everything I heard here, because I'm not sure I could do much better than repeat some of that best advice. And, the highlights of that are, journalism is a skill you learn by doing, right? So this is a very brief window of opportunity to write, be edited by professionals, see input, talk to people who have a lot of experience all around you, and build this portfolio to enter out into the world. So don't sit idly by. Please find out things that you are interested in, that you want to do, but make sure you're getting full breadth. There's a lot of jobs now where you're going to have to come in and, I don't know, maybe take photos with your stories, because, so do you want to sit down and talk to a photographer for a little bit and figure out, how do you shoot video? How do you take photos? Do you want to make sure the breaking news reporters are teaching you their skill? The sports reporters are teaching you their skills. So it's really just this hodgepodge of skill set to take in a very, very limited time point. So I always encourage people to, again, don't be shy, don't sit around. If someone hasn't come to you with something, come to them with something. Bring your own ideas and thoughts. As maybe intimidating as that might seem, it shouldn't. Your editors want to hear kind of the world from your perspective, and how we can translate that into stories. We want the passion that student journalists are bringing to the newsroom. So bring that to the table. Don't be shy about story ideas. And really, always remember too, these internships are also a tryout for the editors in the room where you are. So and there's a lot of cases on this call, being one of those was, listen, we have a position, we can hold that position open to see how things are going, things like that. So, but really work on the craft. It's been tough. I have felt for college students going through internships over the last couple of years as they have been virtual, and that is really tough. And we're coming back to the offices now, and that's, I think that was a whole new skill set everybody had to learn. And if I have one more meeting scheduled on Zoom or Teams, I think, I don't know. I'm so tired of meeting people on the screen. But so it'll be nice to get back in person. But it's been very tough, and I get that. And the success of interns who've made it through this couple of years has been fascinating. But it's a good skill set to learn. But just be open to learning as well. I don't know everything. You don't know everything. We're going to learn from each other during this process. Have open lines of communication with your editors. Tell them what you want to work on. Tell them what you're weak on, and how can I build that. My first conversation with one of our interns this summer, I met with her yesterday, and it was really about, what do you want to get out of this thing before the year's over? What is it you need to learn? What is it you feel that you're weak on? And how do we get you to the skill set to things like that? So have open lines of communications with your editor. So with that, my argument is, find stories, take stories, write stories, talk to people how you make those stories better. Talk to someone after it's run, and what could I have done better? This is a very, like I said, a very abbreviated time to learn this skill, because your next step is a newsroom where people are going to expect that you know how to do this.
Thanks, Mike. Very well said. You
think you're on mute,
reminded
Mike.
me when you talked about learning in my teaching days when I was at Maryland. One of the things I would tell my students was be a pardon. One of the things I would tell my students was be a sponge. Just soak up anything and everything. Make your whole day is going to be full of learning opportunities if you're just open to that. And sort of realize what's happening and ask questions and find out things that you need. So go out there and be sponges, everybody. Now we have half an hour. We can open up for questions, and this is when we usually get a bunch. Now watch, everyone will sit on their hands today, but usually this. So Rebecca, can you be the center fielder for questions?
I will definitely do that. And while everyone's formulating their deep questions, I'll also note that, everyone wants you to succeed. As an intern, you have an editor who's on your side. Everyone in the newsroom has been an intern before, so they want to, help you along. And you have your coach, you have your mentor. Tom and I are always available as well. So don't feel like, it is you're taking the step into the unknown, but we're trying to do it in a way that you feel held and supported. So with that, there are no dumb questions. Let's hear, what are you worried about? What are you thinking about your internship? Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Sierra, go for it.
So this is more for the former interns on the panel. What is one of the biggest mistakes that you might have made throughout your internship? And how would you recommend that we avoid those mistakes?
Great question. Who wants to take it? Is there anyone out there who's made a mistake, first of all? Oh, okay, good. All right. Well, we have people who are eminently qualified to answer that question. So who wants to take a shot?
I mean, I'll just jump right in. I'm pretty sure I had maybe one correction throughout my time as a journalist at the Capital Gazette, which honestly, like, it sucks. Like, no one wants to have a correction. Like, that's literally, you're trained in like J school, like, don't make a mistake because then you have to publish a correction. But I think I got like the date wrong for like something, and honestly, like, all you can do is just like own up to it and don't make it again. And like, that's kind of just like pushes you to be more careful. And I think just the advice I have for all of you is just like, be careful, fact check your work, but like, if it happens, it happens. It's not the end of the world. Like, it happens.
Okay. Who else? Clara?
Yeah, I kind of just wanted to, I guess, piggyback off what Hope said, because I'm sure all of you guys, work for some sort of paper or have written for some sort of paper. And I think one of the biggest shocks for me was like the fact checking process at the Frederick News Post, because I come from a paper where it would go through like 5 rounds of fact checking, and if there was a mistake, like, it would most likely be caught. But here was like, whatever you wrote, they took it, they were like, okay, great, I'm going to assume this is right, and we are going to publish it. So there is not really going to be anybody fact checking your work. And like Hope, I had like a correction or two at the beginning, because part of me assumed someone was going to sort of like check and there would be some sort of safety net, but there isn't really much of a safety net. So don't assume that. Don't go in that someone is going to sort of like hold your hand through what is right and what is wrong. Really focus on getting the facts and checking, when you're writing, because, you don't want to get a correction. Like Hope said, nobody wants that. So yeah.
So Krys'tal.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely made a mistake or two as well. I can't pinpoint an exact situation, but kind of like what Clara and Hope said, when you make a mistake, just own up to it. And I feel like the best thing you can do is like not try and deflect or say like, oh, like the editor should have caught it, or, it wasn't really on me. Because if someone's calling you with a complaint, they don't really want to hear that. Like, all they know is that either they were wronged or something was misconstrued, and they just want you to show accountability for it. And I think that will speak to your character as a journalist. But I don't want to take up too much time kind of reiterating what they just said, but I feel like that's a big thing in terms of like making mistakes as a writer.
Well, and there are also other kinds of mistakes. There could be mistakes in judgment, or making a decision about how you're going to do something. So we don't have to limit it just strictly to errors. Mike, what would you offer us?
Well, again, I think this is about conversation. Real quick on corrections and mistakes. Really good advice here. Own up to it. Talk to your editor about it. Fix it. Move on. If your editor doesn't know about it, they can't kind of work you through it and things like that. So just be open, and there's an understanding, and it's part of the job to be open with our readers for when we make a mistake, and we should be very forthright. Just be careful when how you respond to readers. So I would always talk to an editor first. We fix the mistake, blah blah blah. But the reality is, I think it's really, to me, about the biggest mistake you can make is not communicating and talk. There's so much that happens, and planned and unplanned in this business. So just have constant lines of communication. I remember we had training here during after the George Floyd incident with protests and rioting, and really people need to be very clear when they're going after assignments. This is why you have to talk. It's clear. Have 2 or 3 points of exit when you're covering something that can be volatile. Make sure everybody knows where you are at all times. Make sure you're having communications before you go on assignments. Make sure your boss knows where you're going out, and there's text that you can have conversation back and forth. So the biggest mistake is thinking you have to do this by yourself. You have a team of people who can help you, and use that team. Whether that be a supervisor or other reporters, they are there. And I know everybody in our room, and I haven't met many reporters in any place that I've worked that aren't willing, that they want to help the next generation of journalists. They really do, and take advantage of it.
Okay.
I know I poured a lot into that, Tom.
No, it's good.
All right.
All right.
What other questions do you
Who
all
else
have?
has a question?
Yeah, Connor, go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if the previous interns could kind of talk about the first week, day by day, like how much are you shadowing fellow reporters in the newsroom? Like, what does that first week look like? Like, what is most important to take in and learn during the first week so that the summer can be successful overall?
All right, who wants to start?
I could start off, I guess.
Sure.
So obviously, like, your first week, you have to sort of get to know the newsroom and the area. For me, my first week was kind of slow just because, again, like, I was new to Frederick. I didn't have any sources. So pretty much every morning it was just walking into my editor's office and asking if he had anything for me to cover. But then little by little, like, even as the week was going on, you could sort of start building sources and sort of figure out what's going on to the community. I started following a bunch of social media pages on Twitter, on Instagram. I was scrolling through Facebook a lot just to sort of see if there was anything that I could also pitch. And I shadowed a lot. So the first week is really just building the blocks for you to start doing more regular reporting things that are also your own pitches. So it's just seeing what's available, finding little meetings or little events that you can cover, and then following people around, because sometimes they're also very overwhelmed. So if you're like shadowing them, they might be like, hey, do you want to report on this story? I have to go work on something else. You can do this, you can write it. So it's really just feeling everything out.
Okay, who else? Hope?
Yeah, I mean, personally, like, I didn't really shadow anyone, and because I didn't have a physical newsroom to go into, I just like had like a phone call with like my editor, and then he wasn't my editor anymore. So like very short-lived experience. But I mean, I kind of just jumped right in and started writing the articles that he was assigning me. It started off like pretty simple, and then like it was like a preview to an event and then an event, and then like it just kind of picked up from there. But I mean, I was kind of just like thrown in. I was just thrown in. But it was good. It was a good experience.
And, you know, I would also jump in and say each of you are in a different newsroom. And so, you know, your newsrooms are all going to be pretty separate, pretty different. So Clara's experience and Hope's experience, you may have a completely different experience. So I guess be prepared for anything. But it's generally, you only have 8 weeks. People want you to jump in and do. And we have some newsrooms that are still virtual. Like I know the Sun and the Capitol is still a virtual newsroom. The Daily Record's still a virtual newsroom, although you can go into the office. News Journal is completely in person, or for the most part in person. So it will be different.
Good points, Rebecca. Thank you. We have Mike and Krys'tal, both from the News Journal. I'm curious, do you have is there like a routine for the first week or the first day or first 2 or 3 days? Is there a checklist, or does it just, you just let nature take its course? How do you approach that?
Krys'tal, is there?
So when I interned through this program last year, it wasn't my first internship at the News Journal, so that was a bit different, but I can say my very first time working with the team in general, that first week was basically spent learning the software that we use, learning the workflow. So Monday, well, at that time, every single morning we would have a meeting where you just talk about what you're writing. The editors, the reporters would say like, hey, I have a story about a new school election happening. It should be up by Wednesday. This is what you can expect from me. And so going through that every single day, I don't really think I spoke that much since I was new, and it wasn't like I was really writing anything, but it was nice to hear the other reporters talk and share what they were doing, because it made me feel included, even though I hadn't contributed that much yet. And, you know, now after a couple years with the team and, you know, finally working there, that's something that is just kind of like second nature to me in doing that. And last year, although I already knew all the systems and kind of our workflow, I mentioned earlier that I was getting trained on the breaking and trending news side of our newsroom. So that was a new experience for me. So that first week I was learning how they cover cops, how they cover crime, how we do event coverage, because coming off of, I mean, we're still in the pandemic, but coming off of like a very closed off, like lockdown sort of world, there were finally things happening again in Delaware. So by the end of that first week, there was a Juneteenth celebration, I think that following weekend, and they were like, hey, can you go out to Rodney Square in Wilmington and sort of cover this? And that was my first time ever doing something in person for reporting, because like I said, my first 2 internships were virtual. So it was really great just being able to go out there and kind of just like left to my own devices to go do, you know, person on the street interviews, really getting to see the color and the feel of a place, because my past stories were just kind of me talking to people on the phone and maybe gleaning what I could from their experiences. But this was somewhere where I was actually there in person. I could see what was happening. I could hear what was happening, pulling quotes from random people walking by, getting tidbits of information. So I think although some of you guys might fear that you have a lot to learn and a lot to take in, every single person you're going to encounter in journalism has had to go through that. So no one's going to expect you to come in and think like, you know how to work everything, you know exactly the processes they use and how their workflow goes. Like, people are willing to work with you. You just have to be open-minded and ready to take on that challenge.
I don't want to go veer too far off the initial question, but something Krys'tal just talked about there really hits 100% of, you know, what we're looking for is the stories are out there, not in the house.
Right, they're out
and
there.
as we, you know, COVID's kind of messed a lot of that up, but as we're all venturing back outside again, just remember that the stories are, you know, the stories that resonate are stories that are about people. We could be writing about important issues being done, but it's all about the impact and the effect on people. And the people are out there, not, you know, not inside.
Right. And Connor, I hope that answers your question. I think you will find some commonalities in terms of there's just basic administrative stuff to get done, and that's got to get done in the first week. So you're probably going to have some papers to fill out for human resources. You are going to, and then there's going to be a lot of learning in the newsroom. What's the content management system? Do you have your password? How does it work? Do you need, I know when I was at the Sun and at the Daily Record, we would rotate the interns through the various desks, you know, go spend some time with the web editor, go figure this out, go to the photo department. So we would sort of do an informal, impromptu orientation process there, but at least to get the person around and to meet the people that he or she is going to be working with for the next few weeks. So that will probably happen to one degree or another wherever you go in the first week. Now, I've seen Brian, I think, lean forward a couple of times and was about to ask the question that brought you here today. So Brian, what's up?
No, I've been waiting patiently to figure out if we were going to be remote or not. And Ms. Rebecca just cleared that up, saying the Capital Gazette and the Sun were going to be remote. So I'm good to go on that information. Thank you.
Okay.
But I think that their newsroom is open. It's just people don't go in all the time. Like I know that everyone that I talk to is still in their box at home. And things may change. I mean, a lot of people have been talking about, going back this summer or whatnot, and the summer's basically here. So everything's kind of subject to change.
Everything is such an evolving process, especially as we go in the, I was just looking at Delaware stats, and COVID cases and hospitalizations are going back up again at a pretty rapid clip. And, companies are very cautious about this because of the speed of which it transmits. So you may be in the office one day and find out from the company you're gone for the next 2 weeks or something. Like, it's just an unprecedented, time of journalism.
All right, other questions?
I have a question that's kind of on that topic. So I guess it's more for Hope because her newsroom was virtual last summer when she did her internship. What is that like? What are like some of the benefits and some of the challenges of a virtual newsroom?
I didn't hate it. I thought I was like, when I went into it, I was like, I wish this was in person. Like, I work better like if I'm in an actual place. The good thing about the Capital Gazette is that they sent me on assignment a lot. And so I think that kind of goes back with like, if they tell you like go somewhere, like go, because it like gets you out of the house. And I was able to I was sitting in my childhood bedroom, like working. So it kind of sucked, but it was also not the worst thing in the world. And there were a few like in-person like work things. And I wrote from either my room, or if I was on assignment, I would find a Starbucks or somewhere local. But I definitely did have some really cool like experiences that were out in the real world, which was nice. But yeah, I mean, it really was not that bad. I thought it was going to be worse than it was. So.
Mike,
Actually, I just want to add one thing to that what Hope said. Just because a newsroom is virtual does not mean that the work is virtual. So just to kind of make absolutely clear, you'll still be out in the world and covering things. All of our members who have virtual newsrooms, the reporters are still out. It's not like it was in 2020 where literally everyone was doing things from their home and it was only video or phone calls. So you'll be reporting out in the world. You just might not be filing from a newsroom.
And that's a really important point. And it's something you need to clarify with your editors. Again, Mike's point about communication about everything, because we've experienced one or two cases where there's been say that the newsroom was working virtually, which meant they weren't there, but occasionally an intern would get the idea that means I don't have to leave my house to cover a story. I can do everything on the phone or virtually. And that sometimes, a couple of times, led to a clash of sort of expectations about, no, you don't need to come into the office, but if you're going to cover the county fair or whatever it is, it probably would be a good idea to actually go to the county fair, and you can wear a mask and you can take other precautions by all means. But if you have questions like that, go over them with your editors and make sure that the expectations are clear. If anything is making you uncomfortable, then you need to address that with your supervisor.
Yeah, I mean, our advice to everybody is if you feel unsafe, get yourself out of that position, and then the next thing you don't do is call your boss.
Yep.
So I
you
was
go.
covering this thing. It was really whatever. I wanted to step away because I was, blah, blah, blah. Let's talk this through. That's what we want, people to get themselves out of situations they don't feel comfortable in, and then have that conversation.
And you make that clear to your staff, I would assume. Here's what to do if you find yourself in that kind of situation. Okay. All right, other questions?
How do you shadow a reporter without like stepping on their toes with what they're covering? And if you want to do something instead, how do you do something that someone's on a beat for without like taking it away from them?
I can speak up on this one. So
Okay.
last summer, like I have mentioned probably like 5 times by now, I was working on the breaking news team, but I really had an interest in doing some food stories. So actually at the News Journal, we have a food reporter who's great at her job, Patricia Tallarico, and knowing that that's her beat and she's great at it, I wanted to make sure that, like you just said, I wasn't really like taking a story from her or kind of, stepping on the grounds that she was already trying to cover. So the best thing you can do is just try and collaborate with that reporter and ask them, is there anything that you were thinking of working on that maybe I could help you out with? Or is there a story that you don't think you'll have time to get to that I can take over? And one of the things we ended up doing together was a waterfront dining story. So Delaware is obviously on the coast. We just wrote maybe like a 12 restaurant roundup about a bunch of places in Delaware that you can go to that are on the water. So while you're eating your dinner, you have a nice view. And that was a great way to get a head start. And of course, working with a veteran reporter, I could learn some of the tricks and tips for reaching out to restaurants, for, getting the inside scoop on maybe new dishes that they haven't announced to the public yet, getting good photos. So I think your best bet would be just to ask them. No one's really going to be that upset about you wanting to be a part of their beat. I think it's just, again, like we've all been saying, it's all about communication. You don't want to try and do something kind of like underhandedly and then take away a story that they probably were already 3/4 of the way into. It's just all about helping out. And since we're all journalists here, we all have a passion for the industry. I think they would be excited that you're showing an interest in something that they love to do as well, and would be more than happy to help show you the ropes and maybe give you some things to try out.
And probably would be a little bit flattered at the same time, as we were talking about earlier too, that you take that much of an interest in that subject matter and the sort of things that reporter is doing. Mike, from an editor standpoint, does that pose any problems, any turf problems? Anything?
No, I hate to keep going back to the same thing, but if you are shadowing somebody and you're concerned, you just say, hey, just get the rules of engagement before you go. Like, do you mind if I ask a question or two if they pop into my head? Do you know blah, blah, blah? And it'll all work itself out fine. Yeah, even the most scariest of reporters I've ever worked with are really good at the core, and they really want interns to learn, because again, they want strong journalists coming in behind them in the field, like this group here.
So I'm curious, Mike, at the News Journal, who makes the decision about who's going to shadow someone? Is an intern assigned to do that, or is it just up to the intern to sort of make a pitch if they're interested in shadowing somebody?
Here's where Krys'tal can point out if I'm lying, but since you went through it. But the reality is again, have conversations. What is it that you haven't really had experience on that you'd like to work in? We can get you in touch, work with this person. What is it you feel like you'd like to do? Is there something you'd like to experience that you haven't through this part of your career? Let's hook you up with this person. Let's have you do this. You might have heard Krys'tal work with the breaking news team a little bit. Right. So it was really about like, okay, now let's get you, was it probably Isabel and Esteban, right? Is who you, okay, let's have you work with them. They're the two most experienced people. They're very good at guiding people. So let's have you sit down and talk with them. So really, that's really how I see these internships is, where do you feel like you need work? Where do you want to grow? And let's point you in that direction. But again, I can't answer those questions for you. You have to answer them. Right. You have to answer those so we can help you. And you have to be honest with yourself so we can help, and then when we're having conversations, then we can get you to the right people.
Right. And they should feel free to be open and honest with you, because everybody knows you're an intern. You're not supposed to know everything at this point. You're not supposed to be thoroughly polished in everything. So tell us be open about, this is where I think I need to improve. This is what I want to work on. This is what I want to learn.
And you guys are bringing skill sets that we don't have. And trust me, we're going to want to learn from you guys as well, right? So don't really underestimate that. Your voice has value. I will say that again. Your voice has value in the room. Talk, speak up, participate.
Just to jump in again, while I was working with the trending and breaking news team, my desk was actually right next to that entire team, which was also a great way just to get exposure. I know some people might not feel as comfortable speaking up, so that's a good way to kind of, I guess, like eavesdrop on what they're doing and hear how they're taking ideas and turning them into stories and how they go about interviews without having to ask if you're a little bit shy. The other intern that was with me last summer, he was in this program, but he was a part of the Delaware Community Foundation side. He was interested in writing about sports. So the first week we broke off and he was with the sports team and his desk was with everyone over there. So he could sit with them, see what they were doing. They were taking him out on assignment, letting him lead interviews. And I think as long as you speak up about what you want, I really don't think any editor is going to shy away from letting you try that out. Because again, as people who could be your potential coworkers or are just going to work with you for the summer, they want a strong addition to their team. They don't want to leave you hanging purposely so you have no idea what's going on and you're putting out work that maybe they wouldn't be proud of or you wouldn't be proud of, because again, your stories are going to be on their website and a part of this company's space. And if they can help you become a great reporter, that's only going to help them and help their newsroom thrive.
Absolutely. Well said. All right. What else?
Earlier had wanted to get in with a question. Jake, did I misread your?
Oh, yeah. What is one thing that you guys learned throughout the course of your internship last summer that you wish you had known at the beginning?
All right, great question. Everybody gets to answer this. But who goes first? The age-old question. Let's start with Clara.
Yeah, I touched on this a little bit with my sort of opening kind of bit, but I wish I had known that I was sort of like, even though I was there for a brief time, that I was kind of a vital part of the team there and that I wasn't necessarily less than anyone else. Like I went in again, like I said before, not really expecting like I was going to have a lot of like big assignments just because I was an intern and there was a little bit of imposter syndrome going on. But the team like was very quick to sort of welcome me, and like very quickly I felt like I was just another reporter kind of working there rather than an intern helping out. So I guess my mistake is sort of like going in thinking that I wouldn't be valued. Like you're going to be valued by the team and they're going to trust you as sort of like a team player with assignments and stuff. So don't sell yourself short, is pretty much the short version.
I feel like I just want to steal Clara's answer. But yeah, I mean, basically I would say like the same thing, because genuinely, I don't think there's anything throughout the course. I mean, besides from like learning more about reporting and how to, tell a good story. Like I genuinely did learn a lot throughout my time, but I also went in with, basic knowledge, or else I wouldn't have gotten the internship. But I think really just like knowing your worth and like also like knowing, like, I mean, basically what everyone has said this entire time is like, don't be afraid to pitch your own ideas also, because at the beginning of the internship, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do that. And they were very receptive to everything I said. There was even like I talked about how I was kind of interested in the audience engagement side, even though it was a strictly like reporting internship, and I was able to make like an Instagram story for them and like, on top of everything else I was doing. But just knowing that like, you can throw out these ideas. I mean, they might not say yes to everything, but it doesn't hurt to. So yeah.
Going back to knowing your worth, this is kind of a different take on it. I think the more you report, you realize that sometimes you will be interviewing people or just talking to different entities that kind of have their own agenda with the type of story you want to write. So you might have a certain spin you want to take on it, and maybe they're being a bit cagey about answering your questions. And I feel like sometimes we learned growing up that like the default is to be very polite and to give in when people are asking you of things that you really don't want to do, or maybe they're trying to beat around the bush and answering a question that you know is like the heart of your story. And being an intern, you might feel like I really don't have the authority to answer this, but you should definitely know that you can be assertive. Still being polite. One of my favorite professors at the University of Delaware, he had a motto for the entire semester of class that was be polite, but be persistent. So if you have your objective, you know what story you're writing, be polite and trying to get the information and talking to people, but be persistent because you know what the story is, you know what other information and research you were doing, and you know what you need from them. And of course, if someone's, again, acting a little bit cagey or maybe not giving you what you need, or, you know, maybe saying, well, you don't need to know that, or I don't really have to tell you that, then you can kind of write in your story that that's, you know, how the interaction went, of course, within reason. And those are times when you can talk with your editor and say, I reached out to this place 5 times. They said they would give me information. They didn't. I'm sure all of you have read stories where it says like this publication reached out and so-and-so declined to give back a comment, or so-and-so said they would provide photos or information and they never did. And that's never a fault to you. That's proof that you were doing your job the correct way. So I think it's really important just to not back down and really hold your ground, because your main job is to get that story so readers have a better picture of whatever issue is going on. And if you sort of cower away and don't really do that, I feel like, you know, you're not really trying to the best of your ability to kind of get to the heart of what's going on.
Also, don't be butthurt if people get upset at you about things. Like, you're doing your job, you're asking, sometimes you have to ask the hard questions, and that's just the reality of it. And if someone, you know, wants to be a big baby about it, then that's their own problem, you know, like as long as you are getting the facts and you are, you know, practicing journalistic integrity, like you are fine. Also, the Frederick News Post, for some reason, has a comment section in their stories. Don't read the comment section. You're just going to hurt your own feelings, because also Frederick is like sometimes very politically charged. And so they just get mad about everything. So don't take like criticisms of your work from like the general public too hard, because they also don't know like what went into your process. But like I said, as long as your conscience is clear and you felt like you did the best that you can do, then you should be fine.
Mike, anything to add from the editor's desk?
No, I like what I'm hearing is really the the bottom line. So I wish I had 2 more openings to bring reporters on.
Well, we're at 12:58. So does anyone have an urgent question that they feel like they need to ask at this point?
Now's the time.
That's right. Going once, going twice. So I really appreciate that you guys have hung out for 3 hours on Zoom with us. I know that's a huge commitment, and I really appreciate it. We have recorded. Yep, still recording. So we will, I'll hit end in just a second. You can refer back to any of our sessions today. We'll send out more information about our upcoming Into the Newsroom sessions, and Tom will connect you with your coaches. And we really do wish you all the best in your internship. This is a wonderful start to your journalism career, and I am certain that you will all be fantastic. So stay in touch and let us know if there's anything that we can help you with. All right.
And I'll just add what she said.
All right. Well, guys, thank you all very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, panel. Great job.